Hello. On the 25th of January of this year, I was lucky enough to host a wonderful event in Bristol as part of the Slapstick Festival, which I've been regularly doing now for a number of years. I was hosting an event to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Goodies, and they were all there. Graeme, Tim, Bill. It was a sold out event, sold out way in advance, and I think we could have probably sold 5 times as many tickets. And on that night, Graeme, Tim, and Bill were in fantastic form. Earlier that day, I'd already done an event with Tim, which was an event remembering at last the 1948 show, and we had some of the clips. Something I think that is sometimes forgotten about Tim is just what a remarkable physical comedian he could be. And at last, the 1948 show, I think, has some real high points. And Tim was in great form. We talked about Marty Feldman a great deal as well. And then that night, there was a lovely sense of excitement beforehand in that audience. There was a countdown to the episode which had been voted best episode of the Goodies by an audience that had been corralled by the BBC. And what is rather delightful, I won't give it away in case you don't know what was voted number one, was that it's actually an episode that Graeme, Tim, and Bill don't think is in any way their best episode. And then they had to sit in that theatre and watch the entirety of that episode with various moments of tutting and humming and harring. But it was a delightful night, and I think one of the things as well, every time that I've been lucky enough to do an event with any of the Goodies, you always can sense not merely the tangible excitement that is in a room and with that audience, but also the fact that people are sitting there and thinking all the time, oh, how wonderful it has been to have Graeme, Tim, and Bill with us in our lives, how important work like the Goodies was for many of us when we were growing up, and sometimes for those of us who may not have been having the greatest time at school or whatever it was. The fact that there was going to be an episode of the Goodies that week really meant something, and the fact that we could then go up to our room and read the Goodies book of criminal records, or the Goodies file, or the Goodies disaster movie, or any of those other things, those were wonderful, wonderful and important things. And so, of course, it came as a great shock to everyone when Tim, who that weekend had been as energetic as ever, he'd been at the Slapstick Festival. He did 4 different events over the Slapstick Festival, and that was bookended on the Friday and the Monday with him doing I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue events across the country, one in Worthing and one up in Bradford. So there's a sadness in watching this, because I don't think any of us would have thought that Tim was going to so sadly die not that long after this. But there is also a wonderfulness about just seeing the joy in that room, and the joy of Graeme, Tim, and Bill remembering so many things about all of that wonderful series that they made, and how much they made this part of our childhood and such an important part of our childhood. So this one is for Tim. I know there's sadness when you watch this, but I hope also you sense the great happiness that there was that day as well. Here we are. This was the Goodies 50th anniversary show.
So, this is welcome to this. Let me start by saying William Gladstone, what a squirt. He wears lipstick and a skirt. Some of you will recognise that from the Goodies file, Graham Garden poem. Tonight is a celebration of the Goodies. 50 years ago, when it all began, there have been over 600 votes in terms of what is the public's favourite Goodies episode, and it's being announced on BBC Online tonight. In fact, it may well be now, but don't look yet, otherwise it ruins the surprise. And it's been an absolute joy. For me, the excitement, I'm sure some of you have had the memory of when you would hear the Goodies theme tune and you knew it was about to start, and that feeling in your stomach. I remember watching the one which was all about the election, with the great moment with the 2 secretaries crying, "Don't cry for me, Margentina." I recorded that on a little. My dad brought a tape recorder back, and it was me next to the speaker of the television, just recording that. And all it is a recording of an 11-year-old boy laughing. That's all it is. An absolute joy. So we're going to get started straight away, and we're going to have the what was number 5 in the audience vote. So let's have a look at what got to number 5 in the audience's favourite Goodies episode ever. Here we are. Ladies and gentlemen, And now to discuss that, please welcome to the stage Bill, Tim and Graeme, the Goodies!
Thank you. But we're old now. We're really, really old. Oh, is that what they play?
This is your last chance.
Oh, the old buggers, we'll give them a clap.
Well, this was. I asked lots of friends who love your work, kind of what questions they had for you, and I asked Al Murray what he would like to know about you, and he said, you know, again, such a huge fan of the Goodies, and he said, did you ever have any sense of longevity when you're making, you know, the fact that now, you know, that episode there is 45 years old, people laugh in the audience, the joy and the delight. When you're actually in the middle of making something, do you ever think about?
Well, some of the jokes in that were already 45 years old. We thought it was good for another 45, yeah.
No, you don't. You think, will I get away with it next week, basically?
Yes.
But pay a huge compliment to the guy who directed us, Jim Franklin. All that silent film stuff was brilliantly done, because in those days you didn't have what you have nowadays to be able to
I mean, that's one of those pieces of material that you can be proud of, and even if people are not necessarily falling about, you still think, that was very clever, you know, and it's nice to think you've done something which people like, I think.
It's a pity the BBC doesn't.
Well, this is, I mean, again, that amount of love when that clip was shown, and your love of the movies, that's something here that we see. I mean, there's so many beautiful ideas. And in the actual episode, you have, you know, there was Fellini, as far as I remember. There was, in fact, I had a question from Ian Rankin for you, Graeme, who wanted to know, have you seen Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia?
Yes, I have. Yeah. Warren Oates' greatest movie. Yes, very good.
So
what I love was Buster Keaton making a note of her idea of the building collapsing on it. Excellent.
When you were putting that episode together, because there is so much wonderful kind of homage and all of those influences, and who you also wanted to kind of mock. You know, someone was writing about the fact they feel that your Ken Russell pastiche is so close to Ken Russell, it could have been Ken Russell. You know.
Oh, that's easy. Yeah.
Is that a compliment?
No, I mean, the way we approached an awful lot of scripts, and that one probably more than ever, was to first of all get together and make up what we used to call the panorama list. And what this meant was any subject that we thought that's current, you know, now, so it's going to be fairly topical, doesn't have to be very topical, but we've always wanted to send that up or something like that. And so it's very unexciting, that first step, you know. It's just hard work, yeah.
Well, that pressure, because that was from 1975, so you've been going 5 years, and to an outside observer, it would seem that it was very early, you know, you caught the public imagination very quickly, that once the Goodies began, the excitement, that's, again, I don't know how you feel about that from when it began.
I like the way you're crawling here.
Yeah, really. I learnt it worked on the last session we did, Tim, so I was hoping there'd be rewards.
Absolutely true. But it was nerve-wracking to start with, wasn't it? To start with, people didn't know the characters, and so it took a little time to get off.
It's always the same. When we recorded the first series, every week we had an audience in the studio who had never seen the show before.
Yeah.
So for the first, 13 episodes?
I think about that,
each week it was a new audience we had to kind of break in.
Yeah.
After that, people had seen the series and they came to the show knowing what to expect. But to begin with, and when we started filming, you were filming with a crew of hardened professionals who stand around very stony-faced when you fall off your bike. And, oh, is that funny? Is it? And it's quite an act of faith, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you could choose what do you think people will have voted for? Or what would you like to see within that top 5 of Goodies?
Oh, those are two different questions.
Yeah, they are actually.
Very much two different
So
questions.
first of all, what would you like to think that has really stayed at the forefront of people's memory?
Well, I think the movies is one in particular because it does have quite a lot of, as you say, recognisable little quotes and references.
It's just the last bit, though, isn't it? The last section.
It is. Well, the stuff before that, some of it is probably not very PC nowadays.
I used to enjoy the ones when we'd run out of money, and so we couldn't have a new set or filming, and we'd just be in the studio chatting. And I enjoyed those because they were completely different.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so what would you like? Are there any in particular that you would like to see?
There are about 73 of them I really enjoy. And very reasonably priced on DVDs.
What do you think is going to be in that top 5?
Well, the kitten's bound to be.
Yeah.
Oh, listen to that. Yeah. Not cats, nothing to do with bloody cats, that's terrible.
Just can't help it.
Sorry.
There are certain ones that people have images of what's happening, and Kitten Kong is certainly one of them.
Yeah.
Any others?
The bun fight's probably up in there
Yes,
somewhere.
that's quite a classy one, I think, isn't it? That's...
Which one was that?
And does everybody know what bun fight is? It does, you know.
Fight, the OKT room.
Passed into national lexicon now.
Yeah.
You mentioned Kitten Kong, and I know quite a few people asked how many takes did it get to get that shot, that falling kitten shot, to get that right and get that angle, which of course then is in the opening credits, and it is.
We didn't do menial things like that. We were.
We had a little man who did that for us. Yeah.
A little man to tip over the kittens, right?
The kitten wrangler. Here comes it. He's worked with Kitten Kong and various other animals. Yeah.
I think if you remember in the same sort of sequence, there's a shot where the cat comes up through the dome of St. Paul's. And the problem was it always came up with its back to camera. There are several shots of a hand coming up and turning it round.
Now, sorry, just leading on that one, on Kitten Kong. Obviously, that was done with an old-fashioned way. You know, there is no colour separation overlay, no digital effects or anything like that. And there wasn't at any stage in the whole series. And I feel quite proud of the fact that we were still working in the old language, because I find a lot of today's shows, well, I go to a movie and it's all visual effects. And I had terrible rows with my wife about this one. She said, "Oh, it's fantastic," and then, "No, it's boring. We've seen all that before, you know," and that sort of thing. It doesn't do it for me. So I think there's a warmth.
Have you thought of going to marriage guidance? 'Cause that's
Yes.
right.
Well, we're nearly on to the next clip, but one other thing, just because Kitten Kong was mentioned, and I know that, Tim, this was one of those episodes where you really showed your commitment to a part, I think, in terms of, there is a scene which I know we're not going to be showing tonight, where you are dragged around the park by a kitten, and that was traditional stop motion, I think.
It was.
Yeah.
And if you could, for those people who don't know what happened in that scene, what did you have to go through, literally go through?
Speeded up film, but I did it about 3 times, but it was rushing around with this thing as if it was on a lead, and it was a metal lead, and eventually fell over, and then it was stop motion as I went forward. And it takes quite a long time to do that, stop motion, and then a dog came and pooed just where I was going. And there was this decision, do I go on or not? And being a pro and stupid, I went on, and I regret it ever since.
I don't think they used it in the film, but it was good for us to watch.
Yeah, we've got the previous take in the can, but don't tell Tim. This is going to be fun. Now, the next clip... I should mention, Mark Gatiss, he had a question. He said, looking at the political problems in our country, do you think it's time for Hector and his friends to reform their puppet government and save us all?
Yes.
Well, if anybody can, he will. That's for certain, yeah. I'm a huge fan of that group of people. No matter what it is, League of Gentlemen or any of the number 6, you know.
Well, he said, just do pass on how much the goodies, again, was so formative.
That's very nice. It's a very satisfying thing, I think, for anybody probably doing any job. If you like, peer group actually come and tell you they really like it. You know, there are people you want to like it, and thank God, you know, if we knew the League of Gentlemen thought we were crap, I'd be worried, you know. But
not all of them, no.
Do you know them all?
No, I'm saying no. Leave it alone. Leave it alone.
But there was a lovely couple with the Mighty Boosh, of course. There was Julian Barrett went up. I'm sure you know this. He went up to Noel Fielding and said, "Let's make a series, but I want to make the new goodies. Let's do the new goodies." And Noel.
Who did this?
Yeah.
Who?
Mighty Boosh, Julian Barrett. So they said to Noel Fielding, "Let's make. I want to make the new kind of goodies. Do you want to do that?" And Noel actually says, if he'd used a different reference, I'm not sure we would have ever made the Boosh. That for him, that was like, that sounds like a fun thing to do. That sounds, you know.
I've been really enjoying this, all this praise.
Don't worry, there's an awkward turn in the second half, though, where we, so I'm kind of trying to see. So I mentioned it already, Hector, Puppet Government. Here we are with number 4 in the countdown, and it is Goodies Rule OK.
Oh, that's one of my favourites.
Yes. Why that question? They're clapping the puppets, not us, you know. Not
I haven't actually seen that since we did it. So that bit.
Really?
No, I don't watch us all day, every day.
One of the things that brings back very much to us is how much pain and suffering the people helping us were, because that, you know, the dogs that size don't just move, you can't blow them along. So they built sort of ramps in there and things to grab hold of and so on and so forth. And I think there was something like 10, 15 people in there. I can't remember exactly, but it was a lot, wasn't it?
Swearing away, I remember.
Yeah, exactly. No, we had another programme called Sparkly Pegs. I don't think it'll be in this one, but that had us bouncing around the world in tubes, in
Toothpaste tubes.
What? Toothpaste tubes.
Yeah.
Words are going. Toothpaste tubes, that's right. And you can hear us because there was a sort of frame inside them to keep them steady, because if there isn't, they're going to go all over the place. And as we bounced along on these things, it would go like that. And basically it went, shit, fuck.
The thing is, you couldn't actually see who was in them. And
No.
if
could have been
Bill ever
anybody.
finds out
Could
that
have
Tim
been
and I
anybody.
weren't actually doing it.
Well, that's what I love about that clip. Is I read there were about 10 stuntmen inside that Dougal, and the idea that the week before they'd been James Bond falling off a cliff, and then they'd been Jack Regan in the Sweeney doing a cartoon.
Yeah.
What are you doing this week? We're chasing 3 men in a giant Dougal around Topiary in Woodland. Is a kind of...
Oh, lucky you.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine, you know, when you did leave the BBC, the props department must have been terrified, because you must have been 50% of what was being...
Well, no, go on. They weren't... No, I've interrupted you.
No, it's fine.
No, I was going to say, far from being terrified, I think they can genuinely say, I don't think we've got any of our props departments or special effects departments, people from that era, but they used to really like it. They really liked it. We used a planning meeting a couple of days before each filming, and we'd make a point of explaining how we thought everything should be done. You know, not because we thought better. We thought it was like a challenge, didn't it? You know, well, you could do that, and the props guy was, the special effects guy was saying, they've got a better idea than that. I was like, all right, you do that, you know. And I met 1 or 2 people after the whole thing, probably, who have said, we used to love working on that show.
Actually, that's one of the reasons that we left eventually, because they kept putting them off because they were required for other programmes, and they kept saying, we'll do it next year, next year, next year. And because they were absolutely brilliant. And in those days, the BBC had these specialist departments, wardrobe, special effects, and all of those. And so they couldn't be in several places at once.
Did that become part of the challenge? I mean, that idea of going, do you think we can get this built? Because there must have been a certain point after perhaps series 1 where you went, well, hang on, it turns out more things are possible than we'd first imagined. How far can we take this? What can we build? What can we create?
I think that's true. And what Bill was saying, that if you put an idea to them, they felt they had to do a better one, and they did do a better one
Yeah,
every
they
time.
want to put us in our place, you know.
No, we always knew there was a way of doing it. I mean, you say pull it on a wire, and they'd say, well, no, we can put a little motor inside it and make it work, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got more ambitious. We set scenes on the moon and all sorts of things.
You know, let's face it, you can understand it if you're a technical person, whether you're the cameraman or the sets or the costume or special effects or any of those things. That's going to be more exciting than filming bloody cooking shows, which is about all they seem to do these days. But imagine being a camera on a cooking show. That's all you do, like that, and then like that, and then like that. It must be soul-destroying, and I mean that. It must be soul-destroying.
But that would be a subject we'd do now, wouldn't it?
Oh, yes, exactly.
They'd all explode.
Yeah, exactly, yes. Well, there's an idea.
Noel Fielding beat us to it, though.
Oh, we did, didn't it? Yeah.
Well, we're now going to look at number 3, and number 3 has already actually been mentioned. You presume this would probably make it in there. The next clip we're going to look at is from the classic Bun Fight at the OK Tea Room store.
OK Tea Room store.
Number 3.
Men called him Wild Bill Oddie, and his friend was Texas Tim.
I got to say, from the musical point of view, I so loved writing that song, and the tune, because it had key changes all the way through. When you've got to think, like, dun 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 dun, by the end you're really going, and it doesn't mean much to most people except me. But
what I loved, we always used to call Graeme Mr. Wise because he always had the right padding on his back and always played. And if you notice then, he had the padding on his back, he went and landed on his front. Oh, did we laugh.
And we have the extra happiness, the fact that it's in slow motion as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Doesn't see it time again.
It doesn't hurt so much in slow motion.
You mentioned the music, Bill. Would this have been about the same time that you also... The Goodies moved to Island Records, 1975. Was that a bit before?
Ooh, it's very... I have trouble with the chronology of all that sort of thing. I really do. I mean, the show started in 70, didn't they? Something like 70 to 80. And it sort of became, with a friend of mine, I don't know whether he's still with us even, I used to play charity football with him, and most of the rest of the team were in the record business of one kind or another. And I remember one moment when he was streaking down the wing and sort of called me over and passed the ball to me and said, "Have you ever thought of making a record?" And I was like, "No, not really." Then slammed it in the back of the net. And and he got back to me about that. And we said, "Yeah, okay." And that's how the first single started. The first single was The In-Betweeners, something like that. And then it just went on and on and on, you know. So
He was streaking down the way. Streaking down.
yeah,
No clothes on.
the what?
He was streaking down the wing.
Oh, streaking down the wing, yeah. No, I
I wish I'd been there.
What kind of football or what do you think we play?
Exactly.
See, I'm glad you did charity football, because always one of my favourite things in Porridge the movie
Yeah.
is when the celebrity football team go, and they go, "Who's the goodie?" They said there was going to be a goodie coming to play it, and I like the fact that that's actually
Yes, I like that.
in that as well. I want to talk. I would like to talk more about that episode, but we'll actually very quickly, because I think it was. Is it right? It was filmed in St Just, is it in North
Cornwall.
Devon? So quite Cornwall, is it? So
Yeah, I think so.
quite a small town. So that when the goodies come and you're filming that, do you have any memories of the local town kind of?
Some of the towns were, I mean, where was it that...
Dorset, wasn't it?
Dorset, they gave the kids a day off school.
great, yeah.
They did, yes.
Which meant that we had a crowd of kids screaming around, trying to keep them quiet while we were filming, which didn't really work out all that well for anyone. But yeah, I mean, some of those little towns, we used to get some of the local people to come along as extras too, didn't we?
It could get quite, and it sounds like we're showing off a little bit, but not quite a lot really. But, but it could get really a bit scary, you know. The Winchester one, was it? The one you were talking about. We got sort of locked in our caravan. We didn't dare open the doors, and it was literally people outside all beating on the doors. It was like some horror movie or whatever, you know. And we thought, we just can't go out there. And another one up in Manchester, when we were signing books and records and that, the police announced that they couldn't guarantee the safety of all these young people. And that's a great compliment.
If you remember Barrett Holmes, who used to have the helicopter.
Oh, yes.
And we got involved in launching one of their building sites, and they had a show home they wanted to open, and they got a helicopter to fly us in, which we did. And this site was just awash with children, and the helicopter couldn't land. And they were running across the sort of landing pad, and people were trying to get rid of them, but it was just not safe. So eventually they landed us in the next field, and then we walked in and were mobbed, and we had to hide in the show house and lock the door. And I think that really wasn't what Barrett Holmes had been hoping.
I hope there is one with a blue plaque that just says the goodies hid here between 1 o'clock and 1:15. Now, this is going to come as no surprise. It's been mentioned already. Number 2 in the countdown, I hope I'm right in saying that, is it is Kitten Kong. So here we are. Let's have a look at Kitten, which now puts a lot of suspense. What was number 1?
Ooh.
BBC, London.
You can judge the historic importance of a show by the famous people who are willing to come on and make fools of themselves. Obviously, Morecambe and Wise win by a mile, but we come in somewhere, I think.
But you have, I mean, that's the thing that Michael Barrett, who was a tremendous, you know, with the bounce. And I was watching the other day Raymond Baxter, the wonderful, you know, Tomorrow's World, etc., talking about string in a string vest.
Yes, he was in a string vest, I think.
Yep.
Did you ever, was there anyone who said no? Who were the people who you think, oh, well, I thought they'd be up for that? And
the best ones were the ones that took it very seriously.
Yes.
Yes.
There was one who said no, but not to the goodies. I used to make some management training films with video arts, and Patrick Moore had been on the goodies several times, and I thought he'd be good for a little bit in one of these training films. And so they asked him if he'd appear in a management training films. He said, I'd rather be dead in a ditch. And he had appeared on the goodies with a safety pin through his head, you know.
I remember Michael Barrett interviewing Sooty and Sweep, and saying, yes, so what have you got to say, Sooty? And did it so straight, that was the way to do it.
And you also had Tony Blackburn, of course, was a regular joke. And
we couldn't keep him off, frankly. I mean,
but and he seems to love it. I've seen him talk about it, and he you know, it was wonderful to be talked about, wonderful to be mocked, and then finally, that is one of the most beautiful of all your slow motion scenes. The slow motion eventual assassination of Tony Blackburn, I think, is tremendously touching.
He genuinely regarded it as something he wanted to do, you know. It was sorry, Tim.
We did a promotion last year for the very reasonably priced Goodies DVDs, and we were talking about him. I said, actually, he was very sporting and very good. Little did I know he was in the audience. Suddenly there he was, so phew. But he was sporting.
Yeah.
I have some, again, overly specific questions for various people. Stuart Lee, who I think actually did that.
Yes,
that
he did.
Go and see him, by the way, which I did in London last week, but if you have to go up to London or wait for him to come down, Stuart Lee. A lot of people don't really know him, but it's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm off seeing at the Watford Coliseum. Yeah, Watford has a Coliseum. Who'd have imagined it? But it does.
Make it there. You can make it anywhere.
But he has, of course, a very specific...
there next week, strangely enough. Just thought I'd mention it. We're doing a tour of I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue. We'll be at the Watford.
Are you performing anywhere? Or what?
No, I'm not.
You'll find him on some streets performing.
What day are you performing? Because Stuart does overrun.
I wish I could remember.
There's a lovely story. I asked people for various different stories, or not even that. I just said memories of the Goodies, and one that there's someone called Anthony Elvin who says that when you made Goodies and the Beanstalk, the bath scene was filmed at his mum and dad's flat in East Twickenham. And he said that he asked you all for your autographs 17 times, and you both signed autographs 17 times, and you, Graeme, apparently at the 7th time went, well, I think that's enough now. So
I like that story.
We're going to remember that one, yeah.
Now we're. There were. I have to say some lovely. There was Kevin Eldon, who is a huge fan. Hopefully, you're aware of Kevin. What a wonderful comedy actor and comedian generally. And he just wanted. He said, "Could you preface my question with this? Hello, Goodies. I was always a big fan of the show. Thanks very much for so many great laughs and happy memories." And then he put this out. I hope that's not too cheesy. It's just the 13-year-old me would be so thrilled to ask them a question. And Kevin is wonderful and worked a lot with Stuart as well. And his question is, when you were riding the 3-seater bicycle, how much of a safety risk was posed by the ever-present danger of your enormous flares getting caught in the chain?
There was any danger you can think of was entailed of riding that bike. It was awful, wasn't it?
It had no free wheel for a start off, so that if it went, it caught you on the ankles. We were in the local hospitals quite a lot. It was a horrible machine. So you must have loved the tramdom, as we call it. We hated it.
Well, fortunately, in fact, before we go to number one, we've got one more clip, which is, Tim, you were talking earlier on about the joy when, in fact, the budget had almost run out.
Yeah.
And you would go, right, this one has to be pretty much all set in the Goodie studio. So this is from an episode called The End. So let's have a look at this. And this is just...
appropriate, isn't it? Yeah. That hairstyle suits you.
Yeah, it does, yeah. I'd like that much hair, too.
Now, I think so many of these... 1975, from what we're seeing tonight and from people who voted, that seems to be, for a lot of people, the year of the really episodes that have stayed with them. Is there any? Can you think why that might have been, that particular series?
I think it might have been because it had become a whole thing. We were doing the records, and therefore our profile was pretty high, you know. And let's face it, it takes, excuse me, audiences quite a while to build up, really. And we had all those other things going, and I think that we moved up the ladder a little.
And I think we'd got the hang of it by then.
Really? Never, no.
Before we move on to what has got to number one, something that Milton Jones wanted to ask is, did you realise that you were a role model for a certain sort of child? And I think it's probably true of people that, you know, when The Goodies was on, it was a moment of, you know, sometimes, especially for, you know, kids with sometimes a weirder sense of humour, even though it was mainstream, but it was a really important part of the week. And there are a lot of, I mean, every comedian that I asked, it was an important part of them becoming comedians. This was watching The Goodies.
So it's our fault.
It's your fault. Every time that you look at the parlour state of 21st century television, remember, you created that.
What I find so depressing is very old men come up to me and say, I used to be allowed to stay up to watch it.
It is, I'm going to be sentimental, as it were, that as well as the various very enthusiastic fans who watched it always, the people, usually one person who come up and say, can I thank you for really making my childhood bearable, you know. And there's one or two that say made it bloody awful, but, there's some awful, but basically it's a genuine thanks, you know, and that's great. That it's got to be, you know. I mean, if you don't get moved by that sort of thing.
Don't make me cry.
I'll write you a letter, don't worry.
Thank you.
So, can I ask, what do you think then? So we've reached what has got to number 1 slot. You've seen a few that were in the top 5.
What's left?
69 episodes,
Have you
isn't
got
it?
a guess?
Which do you think?
Well, what haven't we had? Goodies Rule we've had. Have we had
Animals
Goodies
and
Rule?
moon bunnies and...
What does anyone else? What do you think it's going to?
Ecky thump,
Oh, yes.
Well,
ecky thump, aye.
here we are. Voted for the number 1 Goodies episode is Kung Fu Capers, and we are now going to watch it in its entirety. Then we'll take some questions for you as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, currently the public's favourite Goodies episode, Kung Fu Capers.
Oh.
Silly title. Not one of the best. There we are.
Oh, well.
So, what's your reaction to sitting and watching that?
The public aren't always right. No, it wouldn't be my favourite.
No, it certainly wouldn't be mine. I was a bit disappointed.
Goes on to...
Well, that brings us to the end. I told you there was a twist, Tim, didn't I?
This is true.
I'd like a recount.
Well, you did. There was one point, Bill, where I did hear you say, "Oh, thank heavens that bit's over," and that, you know, which was the boxing scene.
Yes.
Those.
Well, that's not very PC these days, and if ever I find out who that was...
Well, 1975, as we mentioned already, was you know, a lot of people's favourite year for the Goodies, and also there was well, we've got some footage which I think one of you have seen not that long ago, but some other footage of something that happened in 1975. I won't say any more about it. Can we just see now what I'm talking about, and then we'll do a reaction afterwards.
No, I'm worried.
It's a big twist.
Oh.
Oh, my goodness me.
I always said that. Did you get that?
That was pretty weird.
Yeah, it was. The thing that saddens me most is I had all that hair and I was quite thin.
You do look like...
I wish I hadn't seen that. I really do, honestly.
I told you, Chris. Anyway, so the... but you look wonderfully like 3 loose hipsters there, I think. And the...
It's really worrying, that was. All the people we used to make fun of seemed to be there. And it was us. Oh, dear.
Anyway, so the Steve Merchant event will begin in... No, the... this is... But you also mentioned there that Jim Franklin going on. And could you just say a little bit about his importance in terms of the process of the show and the creative...
He was a fantastic film editor, basically, to begin with. And he started off, the first series we did, he was in charge of editing the film and putting all the film sequences together. He later then went on to produce the whole show and was meticulous in making what we wrote on the script into the pictures that, you know, you see on the screen, and he would do storyboards, and every shot was worked out. There was an incredible amount of planning in advance. We talked about the meeting round the table with all the departments, and Jim was sort of in charge of all that. was quite an expensive show to make, but it would have been a lot more expensive if it was made the way people assumed we made it, which was just to go out and make it up as we went along. He was absolutely vital to the success of it to begin with there, yeah.
What people forget is it originally went out at 10 o'clock at night. It was, quite late on. Then it was on BBC Two in what became not the 9 o'clock news slot, which was probably our best, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But we owe an enormous amount to him, absolutely incredible amount.
We've got a little bit of time left for audience questions. I'll give you a warm-up question. I've got one from Eric Idle, which is specifically for Tim and Bill. You both auditioned me in January 1963 for the Pembroke Smoker. Do you ever regret putting me in it and giving me my first big break?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
I remember that because he did it with a couple of school friends, didn't he?
Yeah, and the school friends, they couldn't stop themselves laughing all the time. Tim and I were sitting there, okay, go on, do your show. And these two, I can't remember what the sketch was, but they were talking to one another. And it's like people are telling a joke, and they find it funny as well. So these two were like that. Anyway, we go, and then we came in, and they're giggling. And Eric said, he said, listen, I want you to know that's nothing to do with me, that's them. And it's when they all went out and we had to make a decision, I think we were double-tracked, really. We both instantly said, I like the quiet bloke, get rid of those two.
Yep, that's right.
That's it.
Whatever happened to him after that, I don't know.
So let's find out in the audience who would like to ask a question. If we can have the lights up a little bit. So I don't know how much longer we've got, but who would like to ask the goodies a question? Yes, we've got a question just in that middle row there.
Are you going to do any more Audible shows?
Good question. Yes. Well, for those people who don't know, we did a goodies radio show, a sound show, and it was good fun. Bill wasn't terribly interested, but actually produced a new national anthem, which I still hum. And so hopefully we'll do a lot more.
Did you enjoy it? Because I know a few years ago, Bill, you said, well, we can't ever do the goodies again. But now that idea of making it audio, where you can still do all the physical stunts.
Yes, we look quite young too.
I'm not to be taken any notice of. I'm really not, because I'm so often negative about things. I freely confess I'm going to psychiatrists. They're trying to sort it out, But I am. That's not true. But no, I tend to be very negative. So as soon as he says it's radio, and I said, well, what's the point of that? We did, I'm sorry, I read that again for 100 years, And I think I might still, to a point, think the same thing, really. But then again, it was fun doing it, so I think I've changed my mind.
Also, there must be, sitting there with all that audience watching that show, and the laughter it's still there.
Yeah.
For so many people. Does that, when you actually, because it's not very often you get the chance to sit in an audience with people seeing your work and actually hear that reaction and know that it's still effective.
Well, if we made people happy.
They must be very sad.
Which I think, it's the motto of the Slapstick Festival. It's been used every year.
Hadn't got the timing there.
I think we've got another question. Yes, question up near the back there. Sorry, I can just...
Somebody running, I see.
Hi, I was watching the fight scenes there in Kung Fu Capers with a lot of interest. Were they hard to learn how to do, and who taught you how to do them?
The movements.
So the actual fight sequences, did you have a choreographer? How did you learn the true art of Eki Thump and others?
I just, no.
Let Graeme answer that, because we haven't a clue, have we?
We had a book. A book of people in these strange shapes. And we just tried to copy it, really, with no idea what we were doing at all.
No, it was a sort of parody, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The actual.
Does anyone still have those film posters? They're fantastic. Enter with Dragon, in particular, is a fun that is an utter delight.
Yeah.
I don't know. I did them. I don't know where they are now. They've disappeared into the BBC somewhere.
Any other questions? Yes, another one up that section, then we'll come over there as well. Yes, so take the question from over there first.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Given your pop-tastic career, did you ever think that perhaps continuing a music career would have been something you should have done or would have wanted to do?
I think that Bill would have liked to have continued with a musical career, and he did write some very good songs. Don't tell him I said this, but he did. But it was one of those things that if you watch us on Top of the Pops, you can see Bill performing away, me enjoying it, and Graeme wishing he was somewhere else.
Not entirely true. I just didn't want to show you up with my fancy disco music.
In your dungarees.
Those dungarees never lose their power. When I watch that clip again,
No.
But it was, I always had two ambitions, to play centre forward for England and be on Top of the Pops with Pants People. I got one.
Well, I never played for England, but the other half, yeah.
Yeah, that was the one.
Well, Bill, when you I think you've said when the record you made with Ireland, which is fantastic. I just listened to it again. It's got incredible, and you know that process was basically you, wasn't it? And then Tim and Graeme would kind of go, can you pop in on Tuesday about 2:00?
And make
it roughly
and
how
make
it
work.
Yeah, save it.
Yeah.
You'll have to answer that. I didn't get the question completely. My ears have gone. They're gone.
Basically,
They're dead. I
you
can't hear
came
a
up
thing. It's true.
like 3:15, I think. But it was basically you did the music, etc., and we arrived at the last minute.
Oh, yeah.
To make it work, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I loved doing the music sessions. I have to say, in many ways, you know, it wasn't competing with any other activity, but I absolutely loved doing it because we, back in the hazy days when they had budgets and money a little bit, we had a terrific band, really good band, you know, they were top people. And what was very satisfying for me was I thought, well, I don't read music, I don't write music, I make it up, you know. And my my instrument was a tape recorder, really, you know. And I thought I won't get the respect from proper professional musicians, but that simply wasn't true. They really enjoyed it, and you know, added their own things, and it was great. So I was locked up doing the equivalent of half a dozen albums, you know.
We did some recording at Abbey Road, didn't we?
I did indeed, yes.
Stuart Lee's obviously overly specific question. He just wanted to know, Bill, who's your favourite British jazz musician?
Oh my God. I don't listen to much jazz these days. It's a terrible thing to say, and, you know, the MU will be on to me and say, you used to support us. But I actually don't listen to that much music, jazz from this country or anywhere else, really. All sorts of other things. It's more to be esoteric, world music and country and western and all sorts of things, but not a lot of jazz.
Right. And we've got a question up there, I think we had in the corner. Right.
Can you sing Goody Goody Yum Yum? Goody.
What was that about?
Can we sing Goody Goody Yum Yum?
Can we sing it?
Yeah, so jazz improvised version.
Here we go. Goodies.
Goody Goody Yum Yum. Thank you so much. Well, never thought that would happen.
Do we have... oh, yes, question down there. Oh, wait a moment, we're just... the mic, sorry, mic's just coming to you.
Yes, hello. May I ask you all respectively, and starting with Bill, your favourite song and your favourite episode and why?
Favourite song from the shows or what?
Yeah, so yeah.
I mean, the
albums.
What?
Yeah.
And the what?
Albums.
Oh God. There's about 8 albums. We can't go through that lot. And one of my favourite singles actually was Black Pudding Bertha.
Yeah.
Keeps coming back, and I can authoritatively say, I think Tim might have been there. We were in the BBC in a studio, a chat show, and what's his name came in? Can you remember his name? Oh God. Oh dear. Gladys Cooper, not Gladys Cooper.
Alice Cooper.
Alice Cooper.
I remember Gladys coming in. It was extraordinary when he came in. Yes, I do.
Yeah, he came in to be interviewed, and they played Black Pudding Bertha because we probably asked them to, and we got a very good accolade from Alice, who said, "That's a good track. Good track. That." He didn't have a Lancashire accent. No, that's great. That's a really good track. Yeah, that's good. And that was very satisfying, because these are musicians. They may be silly musicians, but they're bloody good musicians.
Tim, Graeme, do you have a...
My favourite track was Cricklewood, because I sang it. Yeah. Cricklewood, no one's going anywhere in Cricklewood. I'm the only person that knows this song.
Wow.
Bill wrote it.
I think one of my favourite episodes was Bun Fight. There's a lot of nice stuff in it.
Yeah.
And it's also got one of my favourite songs, which is Working the Line. Yay! Yeah.
There's a lot in that show, isn't there?
Yeah.
As you said, there's 2 full songs, one a narrative, one and that, and there's several little sequences during it. I can't remember why, I was looking at it last night. But the bit of the gambling with the toast and everything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a lovely little sequence. I think Keaton would have been proud of it. Chaplin wouldn't have been,
though. Do we have... I think we've got time for one more question, hopefully. Right. We've got one down there? Or yes, just if you... and then the blue shirt. No.
Sorry, I've got to say, do you think it's time to re-release the Sick Man Blues?
Sick Man Blues, yes, I enjoyed that one. I did.
We're not...
Do you remember Sick Man Blues, Bill?
What? Do I what? Do I know it?
No, do you remember it?
Of course I bloody do.
I got the answer sort of.
Actually, there's always a little history with these things, and this was what I'm sorry I did it again. I've been churning out 2 songs a week for about 10 years, as far as I could tell. And then in rehearsal, I said, I've got this thing, all I need is a blues from the piano and maybe the guitar. And I did this Sick Man Blues, and I think there really was a feeling of, we can't put that out. But it's not rude, it's, and if you don't know what it is, Google it. I'm not going to sing it
It's
now.
basically the throwing up song,
It's a throwing up, yeah.
I think we've... am I right in saying we've run out of time? Have we got... is it 7:30, anyone know? Have we got time for it? Have we run out of time? Okay, yes. Oh, sorry, I'm getting the light waved up. That's been waving for a while, hasn't it? I thought it was my astigmatism. I apologise. Thank you. So it's wonderful to just see all this work, and it's brilliant that 3 people who've always been tremendously supportive also of the Slapstick Festival. So, ladies and gentlemen, Bill, Tim and Graeme. Oh, I should just tell you they're going to be out front as well, signing things as well. As we found out before, apparently you sign anything. And so see if you can beat the challenge that was set by the 1948 crowd earlier today. I won't say what was signed there. But and I should mention these. I was just given these by Chris. There's also a beautiful limited edition print there as well, which I think is out there. Yes. So, ladies and
That's
gentlemen...
from Gary, who's a very good friend of my wife's, and I met occasionally, and a lovely guy.
And it's beautifully done as well. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for the Goodies!
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Come on, that's good. You've got to stand with the band. Yeah. That's right, yeah. Okay.